I'm excited to welcome everybody to this webinar series, the OR and Beyond. It's our third edition of the OR and Beyond, presented by Total Joint Orthopedics. My name is Andrew Morris. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at TJO and really excited for our topic today. This webinar is recorded, and I do have to mention that the views and conclusions stated in this webinar are those of the presenting physicians alone and do not reflect the views or opinions of any of the companies with whom they consult or their employers. So with that out of the way, it's a perfect segue into our topic this evening, which is social media rules of engagement. I love this title because I think there are no rules of engagement with social media, and that's part of what makes it so fun, so engaging, and maybe so dangerous. So I hope we get to clear up some of those things tonight. I'm so pleased to be joined by two world-class surgeons, Dr. Kim Tucker from the Oro Valley Northwest Bone and Joint, and Dr. Matt Barber from the Alabama Orthopedic Clinic in Mobile, Alabama. So Dr. Barber, Dr. Tucker, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for inviting us. Appreciate it so much.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So I think tonight we're going to be a little loose in our format. So more discussion, more engagement rather than PowerPoints and presentations. So I was hoping to kick it off by really having each of you kind of talk about your approach to social media. So what platforms are you on? What do you get out of each platform? Do the audiences change, and does that shift your content per platform? What is your overall feel and engagement with social media?
Sure. I can start with that one, Matt, and maybe you'll have different approaches, but the primary social media platform that I use is Twitter more than anything for work. I really like it because it's something that I can check in between cases, and I can post cases or look at what other people are doing. We always kind of joke around about Twitter because we all who are on there wish we could do a Twitter fellowship, because I've learned so many things from my colleagues on Twitter. Just even like simple tips and tricks to, getting advice on complex cases. So that's been one of the primary ones that I use. I use LinkedIn as well, and I feel like LinkedIn is a little bit more business oriented and allows for more industry engagement. So that's the one where if I am at a meeting, I will post on LinkedIn and say, here's what I'm looking at. Thanks for having me to do this talk, or things of that nature, as opposed to more social and communicating with my friends and my colleagues on Twitter.
That's great. Dr. Barber.
Yeah, so I would echo that, and you touched a couple of great points there. One is just it's so quick and it's so all the time, and this is time during your day that otherwise would have been wasted or filled with something else that you can interact with colleagues and learn things, tips and tricks. Or certainly at Ortho Twitter, there's a great community of surgeons on there. It's images, quick, 280 characters, whatever it is, just those quick and dirty kind of comments, tips, kind of things to point you in new directions. So I think that's totally valuable in that sense. LinkedIn, I'm there as well. Much more industry business oriented. Facebook is much more heavily patients and much more heavily local patients. That skews a lot more local. Instagram can be a lot of different things. Obviously, it's very image intensive, pictures and short form videos. Whereas you go to YouTube, you've got chances for longer form videos and interactions there. So it varies across platforms. The demographics vary across platforms. Facebook is older. You get to Instagram, Snapchat, things like that. The audience skews much younger. TikTok, of course, within the last couple of years has kind of emerged. Same thing, goes younger, heavily on those short form videos.
I think just to kind of in that line too, Instagram, I kind of use almost like looking for what patients are interested in. So like every once in a while, I'll look into, hashtag hip replacement or hashtag knee replacement and see what they're looking at. I don't really use that one as much for connecting with my own colleagues. But I do use it to kind of see what patients are into. I don't really use Facebook much at all. I am much too young for that. Just kidding. But I actually use that for Facebook groups more than anything. And I think that's a really great place and way to use Facebook if you want to have like private groups. It's kind of a nice place. I did a project with AUKUS where I made a video a few years ago, and I asked for some responses in the Women of Orthopedics group that I'm in, and without doing a survey or taking, weeks and weeks to get responses, I had over 100 responses within 24 hours to my question. And so in that situation, I think the Facebook groups is a really great place to have easy access to your colleagues, and that those groups are private, so there are usually rules associated with them, and you do have to have at least your credentials checked before you get into those. But it's a pretty nice place to be able to either bounce cases off of people or get some information quickly from that community.
Yeah, that actually sets up a question that I have quite well, Dr. Tucker, which is, it seems like there could potentially be a stigma or maybe insecurities on posting your cases out into the world, and asking for advice. Do you think that's changing? And you mentioned that on Twitter, you have a group where you can get good feedback. What do you think about that? Young surgeon coming into practice may not want to air that.
I think it's terrifying to post cases, but I think it's just because maybe that's just me. I'm not as brave as some of my colleagues, but there are people who are, and maybe I know a couple of my friends on Twitter don't have a lot of colleagues nearby that they can talk to. And so for them, this is a fantastic resource. You just kind of have to swallow your pride and go for it. But I think, with posting cases, it's just a little bit uncomfortable. It's almost like I worry about my kids with social media. Like I posed one question about it must have been 2 years ago, and it totally hurt my feelings when people railed on me. And I was like, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant in general. And for 24 hours, I was like, oh my God, I'm never going on Twitter again. Everyone's going to think I'm stupid. But you can see how the kids, especially this is like a full adult professional, I'm spiraling on it. And you can see how kids can kind of do that. But I think, posting cases, you can do it, but you just got to be ready for it. If you're on Facebook groups, most of the time on those groups, there's kind of a known no judgment zone, where I think Twitter is a full judgment zone. You're putting yourself out there if you're posting on Twitter.
Where do you prefer to be judged, Dr. Barber?
Case-wise, there's a lot of good discussion on LinkedIn, and those platforms cross too. And to echo Dr. Tucker's comments, I mean, you'll get roasted on Twitter for stuff that's sort of that's outlying in any way, if you will. But I think the ability to crowdsource ideas and to get direction about cases is awesome. It's one of the highest uses of the internet. Some of these things that would have been sidebar conversations at national meetings in years past, now they happen 24/7 on your phone. So you're able to really avail yourself of a lot of really smart people around the country and around the world quickly. And that's great.
Wonderful. So I wanted to mention to all of you on the call that if you did have a question, you can go ahead and use the Q&A function, type that in, and we'll make sure to answer your questions. We did have a lot of questions that were submitted when participants registered. So I wanted to ask, let's just back up and level set. Should physicians be on social media? It seems like the pitfalls and the dangers could outweigh the upside. Obviously, both of you do it very well. So what have you seen from an upside, and what are your thoughts on just should I do it at all?
So I think everyone is on social media pretty much at this point. Even our patients are on Facebook. So I think that we are on it, whether you use it in a professional fashion or in a personal fashion. Most people are using some form of social media. I think that for me, at least, it has been substantially beneficial. One of the connections that I have with like ortho Twitter, for example, is that anytime I'm doing or putting together a talk, I think about the tone of the people that I see and on Twitter, and I think, oh, this person knows a lot about this. I'm going to ask them if they want to be on this panel with me, or things of that nature. I run one of the podcasts, or I've done a few podcasts for AUKUS, and then I run the Journal of Arthroplasty podcast, and I kind of know what people are interested in based on what I see on their social media more than anything else. And I can tell if what their tone is like based on that as well.
Yeah, do it or don't do it if you want to, but it's out there and it's happening. These topics are being talked about. You're being talked about by your patients. It's all going on. These are all the same things that have gone on for decades, but now they're happening in a virtual format all the time. And you've got a chance to manage your reputation, to use this for your advantage, to educate patients, to link up with patients or potential patients, to interact with people in industry and in your community. So it's there if you want to avail yourself of it.
You know, one interesting thing too, you know, we all get those health grades or like the reviews online. I don't think people care as much about those. They know that's either like really happy or really grouchy patients. But the ones that really matter are like the next door conversations, where the patients are asking their neighbors, hey, who's your cardiologist? Who's your orthopedist? Who did your knee? That is where patients are getting a lot of their information, or those types of formats.
100%.
It's a really good point. So I actually had that question pop up. Are there any, well, obviously we all know about the big ones, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, are there any other platforms that you see as emerging platforms, or platforms that people should be aware of when they're on quote unquote social media?
Well, so studies show that a lot of the orthopedic residents are using Instagram and TikTok more than Facebook and some of the older ones. So I think figuring out how to approach those is going to be something moving forward. There are some really great orthopedic folks who are on those and are kind of like blazing the trail for us, and using their examples, I think, is going to be a way to move forward with that.
Yeah, those are going to keep evolving all the time, and you'll hear about them as they come out, and people will be there. And again, that kind of skews based on age. Younger folks are going to pick up the platforms, and which ones you go to depends on who you want to talk to. And there is crossover between the different ones. It's not as cut and dry as we'd like to make it seem, but they're going to be a little bit skewed based on age and demographics across certain platforms. But just like we think about industry people on LinkedIn, or maybe your ortho group on Twitter, but everybody else can see it. So once it's out there forever. It exists forever in a digital format. So those are considerations you want to have about the tone of what you're saying. You generally, if you're professional, I think, want to have good intent and want to try to be a good human about things, and keep the tone of it at a good level.
Yeah, I think an important distinction. So it sounds like, maybe maybe not primary, but one of your goals is to really get your personality out there. Is that your primary goal, to really show who you are and engage, or what would be your primary goal of engaging on these platforms?
I think it has, I want to say to some degree, it has a mental health benefit too. It's like, it's fun to talk to everybody and get to know people through these social media avenues. I have met so many people that finally we've, especially given the pandemic, that we got to meet at like the August meeting and was like, oh my gosh, we're real friends. Like it's just been really cool to actually get to know these folks, because you see them for years and years on social media, and you're not actually, you don't know them as a person, but they're already your friends. It's just pretty cool. Forgot what the other part of your question was, but sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think that's good. I think that's good.
Okay.
Question on, your employment. So whether you're in private practice or employed by a hospital, how much does that go into your decision, whether, on how you participate through these platforms?
I think if you're employed and you've got, corporate overlords that are watching everything that you do, you've got to be a little careful and comply with that. But I think that gets back to having good intent about it. Obviously, with any of this, you're not sharing any protected health information. You're abiding by HIPAA requirements like you would anywhere else. But just try to be decent about it in how you interact. And if you've got certain people that are watching or have certain policies, or you've agreed to certain restrictions on that, then you've got to abide by it. I'm in private practice, so this is my deal. I own the content. If I have a patient participate in a video, they sign a release for that. I do make sure that we cover bases with those sorts of things. And it's even getting back to your last question, it's just putting yourself out there, because people do want to know you. Your patients want to know you. Larry Dorr said that at ACA several years ago, is like, to lay down and to agree to let somebody open you up and operate on you is just this surreal and insane level of trust that patients place in us. And they're asked to make decisions about that on pretty limited interactions. So a lot of them are looking for a chance to go out and see you and meet you in some sense and know you and find out more about you. And if that's watching you do a surgery or watching you talk about something for a couple hours on YouTube, sometimes that helps them with their decision making.
I'd like to also just mention an advantage that I've seen being a woman in our field is that, trying to be as vocal as I can, because I'm not at any I'm not at programs. I don't have a lot of people that I can mentor. So if I'm out there on these social media platforms, at least they see that there's someone who's a fellowship trained arthroplasty surgeon who can comment on these things. And I think that's important. I see my friend Jamie Bellamy's on this call too. And, we were at AUKUS walking around last year, and another woman who just got done with her fellowship came up to us and was like, hey, I know you all from Twitter, and was like, oh my gosh, it's so cool to meet you. And that was that made my day. Or I guess it was night by that point. That made my night by that point. It was really cool that she recognized us from like the posts that we make. And it was just, it felt really special to be able to, have that connection.
It's a great segue. And the question I had is, if you can become a thought leader on these social media platforms, are you both seeing a translation to becoming a thought leader in person, if that makes sense? Are you being asked to be on more panels at meetings? Are you having more interactions at these local meetings? What is the impact of becoming a thought leader on social and then translating that to your professional career?
I can take that one. I mean, I think you have to be involved in whatever makes you happy, basically. So I think I like working with our specialty society, and I think it's fun to do talks and be on different panels. And so I am, but it also, I'm not sure that being on social media translates to that, but it does mean that some of the people that again, like I was saying before, that I will try to work with on projects or talks are from social media. I know them from there. And I'm like, oh, well, I know this person, so I can get them to help me with this, or maybe they would want to do a talk on this. So that's how I use it more than anything.
The short answer to your question is yes, it 100% crosses over. What, Matthew Ray Scott and others have talked about, kind of the transition from key opinion leader to digital opinion leader. It just means that a lot of these interactions are happening virtually, and people get to know you and like what you're saying or want to hear more from you based on those. And some of that translates into more academic. You've talked about certain topics on social media, then you get asked to talk about them more. Some of it's interaction with industry. Industry historically has, had consultants that they would put on the podium, and those folks would give a talk, and they were very influential in that setting in a meeting. And then they would go back to being invisible for another 364 days a year. And now that's over. Because people that have something to say or that have thoughts about cases or about techniques or anything to share, they can do it all the time.
I think another nice segue there. So you had mentioned that LinkedIn is, more industry driven. And so when you're looking at content you're creating and content you're seeking on a platform like LinkedIn, what are you looking for? What's relevant to you?
Well, so I'm, blessed that I came into all of this with no expectation. So I just, put up whatever sort of strikes my fancy at that moment. You probably tailor content a little bit more for platforms based on who you're thinking that you're speaking to, but don't ever sleep on the fact that this crosses over. So as much as you may be talking to surgeons or people in industry on LinkedIn, you're also talking to that local employer that may be interested in direct to employer contracting, insurance bundles for total joints. You may be talking to that self-employed contractor who's very busy in your community, and he or she is just, they're not on Facebook. They don't care about the social aspects of it, but because of the business, they're on LinkedIn. And that's the only platform they're on, but they're really a patient. They're not directly connected to orthopedics. So these all cross over. And there are people out there looking at your stuff. They may not like it. They may not share it. They may not comment on it, but they're on all these platforms and they're looking at stuff all the time.
There are also, ways that we can use these I guess you can use them in an anonymous way too. So if you have either been followed or, harassed or anything by patients or someone online, you could always sign in under an anonymous account. I think, Matt, you're on as yourself, right? Because I have mine as my name and my credentials after it. So that means I really try to not rock the boat too much, if you know what I mean. Like, I'm basically going to say things that I think are appropriate for anyone to hear, given my job. So that's something to consider. But if you wanted to, have an anonymous account and, comment in a different way, you totally could.
That's great.
Sure. Obviously, you lose a little of the connection with that, but your point is there. And you are going to have people that message you inappropriately or just weird online, but most of us know how to block people at this point. So you can do that too.
That's great. So I think that leads us to, what are some key watch outs? What are some things that you can easily get in trouble with? What are maybe some just quick hitter areas of concern to be aware of? Dr. Barber, let's start with you.
PHI, don't share protected health information. It's easy to do inadvertently. Somebody snaps a picture of an x-ray and they just don't look and there's something in the corner. some cases that are even x-rays or anatomic pictures that are so specific that they become identifiable, it is sort of like showing that patient. So don't ever do that without their consent. I try not to filter too much. I want to, speak as much of the truth as I see it, as is reasonably appropriate, and not, obviously what we do is surgery, and some platforms censor graphic images depending on what's in them. So, just be aware that you may get some of that filtered out through the algorithm or censored.
I think one other thing I'd mention along that is that, you need to be ethical when you're posting these things and recognize that people are looking at you as a representative of our community of physicians and orthopedists. So, if you are unpleasant or rude to another specialty or other colleagues of yours, they will know that.
Sure.
So, and then about posting personal things. So, I mean, if you have a personal account, you probably need to just be sharing that with friends. And I think most of us now know how to do that as opposed to sharing with a large group. There's like Instagram's close friends or things like that, because you probably don't want to be showing, I know, like, whether you don't want to be showing like that you were out having a glass of wine at dinner or something, something that could be honestly unethical given our careers potentially. Not that that's not a normal human thing to do, but I'm just saying, like, you got to watch what you're posting, because anyone and everyone can see it.
They can see it all the time, and it exists forever. And you're going to be able to see me evolve and see the thought process of what went on in my career, because it's all documented there online. I do think that the more that you engage and the more you're out there, not that you should ever be rude, like, to colleagues or anything, but you can be a little more controversial. And I think that's something that's really interesting about social and about the internet, is its own capacity to self-regulate. And so people that come in with the just out of left field with really crazy stuff or outlying opinions, there's usually a community there that's going to step up and say something about that and counter that. And it's really interesting. And there have been a couple instances, some cases that went up on LinkedIn. I can think of an instance, and a surgeon just put something up, and it was not good. And some people commented, and then he just doubled down a few days later and put up something that was absolutely just hot garbage. And the community sort of jumped in there. It crossed over to Twitter, where, to your point earlier, just got absolutely roasted. And, in fairness, board and the ABOS and nobody else had kept this person from operating. And so does social media do that? Does that put the word out? Does that put pressure on some of these systems and help to regulate?
Yeah, great. I want to, again, thank you both for being here. And I want to put your handles up here for those on the call. They can go ahead and make sure you follow Dr. Tucker and Dr. Barber on these platforms, and you can find the others. Going back to a conversation we sort of started to get into, if you are, just coming out of fellowship and joining a group, whether it be private or employment, and if they have a no social media policy, for example, what would be your pitch to the, your employer to say, I should be doing this?
I work with a hospital group right now, and I think they may, I honestly don't even know if they have one. I bet somebody else could answer this better, but honestly, I don't know if they know what I'm doing most of the time. So I just don't post anything that I think that they would be upset about or worried about. And I have a disclaimer in my what do you call it? The description of what I do. So I basically say these are my personal opinions, not the opinions of my employer, hospital. I think that's probably pretty good with that. I mean, we're people too. We get to do what we do off of hours, should be our own time. So I think that's real tough. I get it with the posting of x-rays, but I think that's one where you'd have to talk to them. I think one of our friends had this issue and they basically said no x-rays. So maybe you just can't do that. Matt, do you have something different?
So I'm in a private practice. I work at a privately owned private hospital. So I just don't have a lot of this, but for somebody coming out, I would take, you've sort of adopted the posture of beg forgiveness, not permission, unless they specifically made you sign something real limited. But for them, they're missing a huge opportunity, because this is a chance for a surgeon in their ecosystem to be known and to be reaching out to the community. And this is no different from somebody, giving a talk at the Rotary Club 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
They're just out there and they're being visible, and it would really help them. And they're stifling that and choking it if they try to limit it. And for somebody coming out, I would tell you, think carefully about that. Control your personal brand and who you are. Obviously, a lot of people are in employed situations, and that's going to increasingly be a thing going forward. But, push back a little bit and own who you are and make them give you a little leeway.
That's great. So do you have any interesting stories, something that surprised you as you've, sort of become more engaged? Any interesting stories or fun stories?
I'm not going to say a fun story, but I want to give some advice to people who are thinking about doing this. People just post random stuff like, I was thinking about eating a burrito today. But one way to get some engagement is to ask a question at the end of your post and then tag a few people. So if you pose a question like, what sutures are you using for this? Even if your comment is like, well, I just had a bunch of drainage today. What sutures are you guys using? And then tag a few people. You will get a lot more engagement if you ask a question, as opposed to if you just leave your thoughts on social media. So that's one thing I'd mention.
I think there's a ton of interesting stories. I think it's been a very rich set of interactions for me over the past few years. I saw a gentleman in the office that flew in from multiple states away a couple of weeks ago to see me, just because, he'd seen me on YouTube and liked what I was talking about and felt like I was relatable. We talked. He decided to come down and see me. Met a ton of friends in industry where we've interacted. Other surgeons that, as Kim said earlier, start off as social media friends and you meet in real life. Sometimes you get to go hang out in each other's ORs. There's a lot of cross-pollination of ideas and a lot of sharing that goes on, especially with people that do things just a little bit differently than I do. So I can really challenge the way I'm thinking about things. That part's been awesome. And it's a way to sort of accelerate that exposure to other technologies, to other techniques and everything that's out there. Whereas, historically you're living in this real narrow silo, depending on how many partners you have in your subspecialty, how many are in your area, who's active in what. So you're not waiting for everything to just filter out to the journal and textbook level before it gets to you.
I want to mention too, the residents and the fellows and students, they're going to use this stuff way more than we do. Like, I'm old enough that I still have to print out all of my WLA articles to read, but these guys, they don't do any of that. So this is normal for them to use these modes of communication. So that's where I see the future of this heading with regards to, our journals and doing podcasts and doing the videos that Dr. Barber's doing, and, the TikTok patient videos that one person who's really great at this is Corey Calendine is doing on TikTok, and it's just, there's a lot out there, and I think we're just going to have to think and be creative about how to use these platforms.
It's an incredible opportunity for training, as you said. I mean, and I'm not that old, but like when I was a resident on call, I would have these x-rays that hung up on a light box, and I would page the senior resident to describe something over the phone and try to get a classification system. And now, images just shoot everywhere like that. And the opportunity to have videos of different techniques, at your fingertips, like you said, even between cases on a surgery day.
Right. So I'm curious, a lot of people are, hesitant because feel that this might take a lot of time. It's difficult to create content. What are your thoughts on, how much time are you spending on social media, and how difficult is it to create content? Sort of what are your challenges? Dr. Tucker.
I spend a lot of time on social media. I've been on like my social media is open right now, for example, but I think it's something where between cases, it's kind of fun to just check in with what's going on. I would say to get started takes no time, but because you can just hang around and not be a part of the conversation for a long time or ever if you want to. You can just watch what everybody's doing, kind of learn how to do it that way. With pretty much all of these, I think you can do that. The main ones, being like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, I think you can just kind of lurk around. And it's not negative. I still think that's a very positive way to see what's going on social media. I think that's all I have on that.
I mean, you have said lurking twice, and so I
love lurking.
I want you to know that's called market research. Okay, it's not lurking.
Thank you.
It's great, Dr. Barber.
Yeah, you can do as little or as much as you want, and the barrier to entry is zero, because everybody in this scenario has a phone, and so you can type a question, you can respond to something, you can do market research, you can shoot a video, you can do any of that. The sky's the limit. You decide how much time you want to spend on it, or if you want to do something professionally produced. The time varies. I mean, depending on how busy I am in the OR may determine how active I am at a given time, how much else is going on in my life. But some of that comes and goes and can be very fluid. And if you're not trying to do it to earn a living or something, then there's no pressure, and you just figure out which of those engagements you enjoy and what you want to do with it and make it happen.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I want to mention to everybody on the call that we'll be sending a follow-up email. We'll have some of Dr. Tucker and Dr. Barber's favorite people to follow on social media, along with some other tips and tricks to social. So keep an eye out for that. I want to open it up. Any final thoughts from both of you here, Dr. Tucker?
Well, I would just encourage everybody. I think a lot of you all that I see on here, I've seen on social media. So, but encourage your friends to be on this too. It's really a great place to have good conversations and learn a lot and get to know a lot of our colleagues that you may not necessarily get to know in real life.
Great. Dr. Barber.
Yeah, same. I mean, figure out what you want from it. There's a lot of great opportunities to learn. If you want to do it to market or to reach out to patients, you can do that too. Hit either of us up. I'm sure we can share some things to help get you started. This is just how people communicate. These are the same things that humans have been doing forever. It's just in a different format. Social media hasn't changed us. People are still the same. It's just exposed who we are, and it's changed the flow of how we communicate a little bit.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. Thank you to everyone that joined, and we'll see you next month for the next installment of the OR and Beyond. Dr. Tucker, Dr. Barber, sincerely, thank you so much for joining today, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.